Classic Battles, Rhinar versus Dorinthea. This is a brand new product by Flesh and Blood creators Legend Story Studios and features a classic battle of the world of Wraith. Rhinar, the brute from the Savage Lands, versus Dorinthea, the warrior from Solana. How's it going, Rogues Gallery, and welcome to our official review of the Classic Battles Rhinar versus Dorinthea box set. In today's video, we are going to open up the product, take a look at all of the contents inside, including every single individual card, in case you would like to see them all laid out individually, as well as give you my thoughts on whether or not I think the product is worth it for you as a new player, as an intermediate player, as a longtime player, or as someone who's just a fan of the world of Flesh and Blood, the world of Wraith, and someone who just wants to collect all of the things. I'm also going to talk about the product as a whole, as a complete box set, as well as some of my thoughts on some of the individual cards. Now, we're not going to go into card evaluation, but I do have some thoughts on some of the card choices for the decks. And I've been doing some gameplay. I've been playing, somewhat extensively with a good pal of mine, iHankJr. He is a Brute Squad member, a big fan of Rhinar, so, jamming some games versus him as Rhinar, playing the new Rhinar deck, gave a good perspective on the product in terms of balance, because he's a veteran Brute player, as well as an idea of how the games are going to play out if you just pick up the product and jam some games together. So, before we get to that part, let's take a look at the product. Let's open it up and kind of go over what comes inside the Classic Battles, Rhinar versus Dorinthea. One 2-player paper playmat. It's basically just like this, but on both sides. One Classic Battles Rhinar versus Dorinthea lore booklet. And here we're just going to flip through the lore booklet. We're not going to go super in-depth on it. It is much more of a lore book than an art book. There's a lot of reading in here, but there is a good amount of very, very pretty artwork in here. So we have Dorinthea's story, and then we also have Rhinar's story. I really love the bits of concept art that we find in here. There's not a ton of it, but I really appreciate that kind of stuff, so you can kind of get an idea of the design process for the world of Flesh and Blood. 2 fully built, ready to play Blitz decks starring Dorinthea, Quicksilver Prodigy, and just Rhinar. Let's take a look at the contents of the decks here. So we have Dorinthea, Quicksilver Prodigy, in cold foil. She looks absolutely beautiful. It is just a single-sided card. So, you know what? Let's do our due diligence and grab some sleeves. These are Dragon Shield Flesh and Blood sleeves, just for the occasion. So let's sleeve up some of our nice cards here in these beautiful Fiendel's Spring Tunic Dragon Shield sleeves. So here we have our Dorinthea Quicksilver Prodigy. Absolutely beautiful card. And that one obviously will get a sleeve. These decks will all get sleeves, fully sleeved as I test them. Here we have a cold foil Dawnblade Resplendent. And here we're not going to talk about the playability of these quite yet. We'll talk about that in a little bit after we go over each of the decks. And now here we have some of our rainbow foil equipment. We have an Iron Rot Helm. This one will be good for commoner players out there. Here we have a brand new card, Blossom of Spring, that I actually think is quite good in Blitz. I think people are gonna play with this in, top tier Blitz decks. Here we have Gallantry Gold, a reprint from Monarch, a great card, honestly. This one also gets a sleeve. All of the equipment gets sleeves. And then rounding it off with an Iron Rot Legs, another one that you can use for your commoner decks, or if you're just playing on a budget. You get a full rainbow foil set of equipment, and then a cold foil weapon, and a cold foil hero. A nice way to start out your Flesh and Blood collection. And then from there, we have the rest of the deck. We have Hala Golden Helm. We have a single one of these. So if you would like to get multiple copies of this, you would need to purchase either multiple copies of the Classic Battles or just singles from an online retailer, or I recommend your local game store. The same is true for this card. This is probably going to be the standout card of the set, Glistening Steel Blade. This is one that I know a lot of folks will want to get multiple copies of, so once again, I think it's best to buy singles of this particular card instead of buying multiples of the Classic Battles set. Here we have another new card in Guard, and we're not going to really go over most of them in detail. We will have almost a full playset of these cards for this deck because for Blitz, we have 2 of a maximum per deck. So we have Warrior's Valor, Classic Warrior Staple, Sharpened Steel, another Classic Warrior Staple, run through a new card, which is decent for getting Go Again there. We have Thrust, another new card with beautiful artwork. I do love seeing all of the new beautiful artwork. We have In the Swing. This is a Everfest card. Iron Song Response, a Classic Warrior card. Driving Blade. There are a lot of Warrior staples in here, though the ones that we do see are either common or rare. We have Slice and Dice. On a Knife Edge, this card I think is really interesting, and the fact that you get 2 of them is really good because I think this card will see play outside of this Classic Battles box set. I think this is actually very, very good for Rune Blade. I want to play this in my Briar deck in particular. I think it pairs very nicely with the Rosetta Thorn. Here we have a couple Out for Bloods. And as you can see, we have 2 of basically everything except for the cards at the start. We have some hit and runs here. Visit the Blacksmith. This is a new one. With awesome artwork. Love the flavor here. Blade Flash, same. Just another new card. Once again, this is actually a generic card, which I think makes it a little bit more interesting than it would be otherwise if it was a warrior card, because it gives target sword attack Go Again. You can give your Talishar Go Again, or like I said, your Rosetta Thorn. Here we have Toughen Up with a new symbol here, denoting that it is a defense reaction. It's very interesting. We also have another classic Sigil of Solace, and this one actually has some reminder text on how instants work for new players. Another classic Flock of the Featherwalkers. And then we have a new Titanium Bauble. What makes this very interesting is that it actually blocks, unlike the Cracked Bauble, which you cannot block with. So this blocks for 3, and it pitches for 3. A very interesting card, very interesting inclusion. Love seeing more Baubles. I'd like to collect the whole Bauble menagerie someday. And then finally we have a Quicken token for that Flock of the Featherwalkers. And then we have a full art Dorinthea Iron Song. Now let's take a look at the Rhinar deck. This deck follows very similar logic to the previous deck in that it comes with a Cold Foil hero, a Cold Foil weapon, and 4 rainbow foil equipment. So let's get some sleeves for our good pal Reinhardt here. What's very interesting about this is while Dorinthea is a new version of Dorinthea with new rules text, this version of Rhinar is just an alt art version of Rhinar. So if you love the traditional, the classic Rhinar, you can play with this version instead of the other version, and this one is a Cold Foil. This one is just a kind of like a hero token and a reminder of how the Intimidate mechanic works, which is very relevant for Rhinar, but we're not gonna get that one a sleeve quite yet. Let's get this new club a sleeve, the Bone Basher. Not quite as strong as Rhinar's signature Romping Club, but I think it's very feasible for a beginner product. Here we have another new piece of equipment, the Bone Vizier. This one's very interesting. It has a blade break and some, new mechanics here. Next up we have another one of the Blossom of Spring. Like I mentioned, I think this card's actually just good in Blitz. It's just really good. It doesn't block at all, but you can use it for a resource whenever you need it, which in Blitz, if the format is very quick, which it is, then, it's gonna be very useful. Here we have an Ironhide Gauntlet, similar to the Iron Rot Gauntlets, but they block for 2, but require a resource to use. Here we have the Ironhide Legs, same kind of deal. Really pretty though. And I do love how they give you a full set of equipment, even if they're not, very fancy legendary equipment. Just getting a nice little full rainbow foil set here will set you on the right path. Now let's take a look at the rest of the Rhinar deck, kicking it off with Chief Rookatan, a new Brute Mentor. We also have the Alpha Rampage. This is a reprint of a Rhinar Majestic specialization. It only comes with one, so once again, if you need to get multiple copies of this, then I would recommend just buying singles. Here we have another new card, Beast Mode. Here we have another classic pack hunt, and from here on out, we have 2 of every card. So it's just the first 2 Majestics where you only have a single copy of. The rest of the deck, you have a full playset, which is nice. It's nice they have a full playset of everything else, at least. We have some Wild Rides, another Brute Classic, Wrecking Ball, a new card. We do have a fairly decent amount of new Brute cards here. Some of them I know Brute players, like this one, are very keen on playing with. I think this is a very interesting card, and that it has an ability that triggers when you defend with it, which is pretty uncommon. We see a lot of Brute cards that don't block at all, so having an ability that triggers when you defend can be very interesting. Like this Smash with Big Tree has no defense here. But sometimes you just need to smash with your Big Tree. Here we have Muscle Mutt, a new just generic 6 power card. It's basically a Raging Onslaught, but slightly worse because Raging Onslaught blocks for 3 and that Muscle Mutt only blocks for 2. Another classic Wounded Bull. Barraging Beatdown is a Brute staple. Fantastic card for any Brute deck. Rally the Rearguard. I imagine this card is included to make use out of those 0 block cards because you can discard them to pump up the defense of Rally the Rearguard, so you can still use them to defend if you need to, if you have the Rally the Rearguard in your hand. Wreck-a-Romp, another Brute staple. Come to Fight, actually love this card. It's a nice little pump, but it also pitches for 3 and blocks for 3. Clearing Bellow. This card is actually fantastic, I think. This is one of the new cards. I think this is one of the new cards that Brute players will definitely want. This is just a 0 cost card that intimidates and has Go Again. It's also a blue pitch card and blocks for 3. So it's a blue pitch card that has a good effect, pitches well, and blocks well. So I think this is a great one for Brutes. Here we have Dodge. This is as basic as they come. A 0 cost 2 block card, and it has this new defense reaction insignia down here. And then finally, we have the Titanium Bauble. All right, now that we've taken a look at all of the contents of the product, let me give you my overall opinion of it. I, as a huge Flesh and Blood fan, I like the product, but I think it is going to be better for some people over others, and we'll talk about that as I kind of just extrapolate my full opinions on it. There is also one other thing that I want to mention. I was actually talking with Flesh and Blood creator James White, and he talked a little bit about some of the, I would say, issues they've had with this product in particular and things that they're looking to improve upon. So the first thing is the packaging. They are very not happy with how the packaging turned out, and that is something that they're going to be looking to improve upon for the next Classic Battles product. The other thing is the lore book. They're actually very disappointed in how this lore book turned out, both in terms of quality and size. And, you know, I don't think it's like too bad, but also I don't think it's like super spectacular either. I think it's pretty good, but I think both Legend Story Studios and fans of Flesh and Blood were expecting something a little bit more grand, and that's something that they're going to be looking at changing and fixing for the next release of the Classic Battles product line. All right, so who is this product for? Is it for new players? Is it for well-established players? Is it for collectors? Well, I think we're going to have some definitive things to say with this. So, if you are a new player of Flesh and Blood, is this product for you? I would say maybe, right? If you are brand new, you've never played a game of Flesh and Blood, I don't think I would recommend this product. I think you should pick up the free IRA welcome decks. These decks are, like I said, absolutely free. You should be able to find these at your local game store. Just walk up to them and ask if they have any of the free IRA welcome decks. This is going to be the best way to just learn how to play and to get into the game. Like I said, they're free. Just pick up a couple of these, play with a friend, And that's going to be my recommendation if you are absolutely brand new. You also have another option as well that I think is as good or maybe even better than this option. Well, the decks are free, so it's kind of hard to beat free, but the pre-constructed Blitz decks are another really, really good option at only $12 about. And yeah, this is another great way to play Flesh and Blood to expand your horizon. There's not a lot of expensive or like chase cards in these. It's just a really good, affordable way to learn how to play Flesh and Blood. So I would recommend both of those products before you go with the Classic Battles product, especially since the Classic Battles product is $50 MSRP, though I have been finding them for closer to $40. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the price point there, but it's really hard to beat either free with the Ira Welcome decks or just 12 bucks with one of the Blitz starter decks. So I'd recommend both of these first if you are brand new to Flesh and Blood. Well, with that said, I would recommend the Classic Battles box set if you are kind of at this stage and you want to take the next step forward. I think this is a great option. Or if you are a new player, you don't have access to these, and you can find the Classic Battles for cheap. And by cheap, I mean like around $40 or so. I think that's when you're going to start to get your value as a new player. But until then, these are just absolutely great ways to just try out the game. Now, do I recommend the Classic Battles box set if you are a long-time player of Flesh and Blood? If you're like me and you've been playing for a couple years now, or even if you've just been playing for a couple months and you already have like your deck and you know you kind of are in the groove of things, do I recommend this product for you? Maybe, but probably not is the answer here. I would say if you are the kind of person who just wants to buy all the Flesh and Blood products, you're a huge fan of the game, like me, you're probably just going to buy this anyway, right? You're like me, you're just going to get it anyway, just for the kind of the cool cards and like the unique stuff in the box set, regardless of how powerful they are. And with that said, there's not a lot of really powerful cards in this box set. There are some very interesting new cards, and we'll maybe show them off in a little bit. Not all of them, just some that I think are kind of cool. But there's also some cards that are just strictly worse than other cards in the same decks that they're in. Like, for example, we have Sharpened Steel in the Dorinthea deck and On Guard in the Dorinthea deck. These cards are literally the exact same card. They have the exact same text box, exact same defense value. The only difference is that On Guard costs 1 to play and Sharpened Steel costs 0. So Sharpened Steel is just better in every way than On Guard. So there's some cards in these decks that are just strictly worse than other cards that already exist. So keep that in mind. Some of these cards are made specifically for new players in mind, cards that are just not going to make it into your constructed decks. Now, with that said, there are a couple cards that I think will make it into your constructed decks, depending on what decks you are playing and what formats you're playing. So, for example, and I think this is the best example, Glistening Steelblade. This card is very, very strong and will make it into a ton of Dorinthea decks, specifically Dorinthea decks because this is a Dorinthea specialization, but this card is very, very powerful, probably the chase card of the whole box set. But I think there's a couple others that are good too, that we'll see play in different formats. So here we have Blossom of Spring. I really like this card, and I think this card will see play in both Blitz and Commoner, just because it does something fairly unique, and it could also be seen as a budget option for Fyendal's Spring Tunic, but it's also a little bit faster than Fyendal's Spring Tunic. So if you're playing in a format where, you know, the games only go to about 3 turns, I think this is just better than Spring Tunic, even though you can't block with it. And then also my personal favorite card of the set is just this common card, On a Knife Edge, which is just a non-attack action that gives a sword go again. And I think this is really cool because it's a generic and you can play this in non-warrior decks like, I don't know, Runeblade. And this card is a common card, so you can play this in Commoner as well. Well, I guess Briar in Commoner just got that much more powerful. But what I'm trying to say here is there are some cards in these decks that I think are worth looking at and playing, but they're usually, other than this Glistening Steelblade, this is not Glistening Steelblade, this is Glistening Steelblade. Other than this Glistening Steelblade, most of them you get 2 of anyway, and they're just kind of like at the common rarity, so you just have them, and I don't think they'll be very valuable. So That's a long-winded way of saying, if you are a long-time player, just buy singles. Unless you want just all the cards and the little lore book, and you want to get the cold foil Rhinar and the cold foil Dorinthea, which honestly I don't think is as good as normal Dorinthea. Unless you want to get all of that stuff just to have, just buy the singles that you want. And I think there's a couple, you know, here and there in this product that are worth pursuing and worth playing in competitive decks. But do you need to spend the $50, the $40 on the product? No. You can go support your local game store, just buy some singles. I'm sure some stores are going to be cracking this product for the singles anyway, because there are a couple in there that I think are worth it. I also just have to say that I think this product is really cool for collectors, not investors, collectors, as a first of product for Flesh and Blood. This is the first of its kind. It's kind of a new thing that they're trying. There are a couple, you know, bumps here and there. We got the lore book, we got the packaging, like I said, that Legend Story Studios is looking to improve upon for future releases. And so this might be a fairly unique product in terms of the longevity of Flesh and Blood. So as a collector, as someone who's a fan of Flesh and Blood, I think it's just interesting and just kind of cool to have. So if you're a collector, I think it could be worth picking up. But like I said, the best person to get this is that player who's just gotten into Flesh and Blood. Maybe you've played with your free Ira decks, maybe you played with some Blitz decks, and you just kind of want to take that next step up. Or I suppose if you are just a casual fan who just really likes the world of Flesh and Blood, and just want to pick up a product to play with your friends. And that's something that I'm going to touch upon now, is the playability of this product. So I have now played with the classic battles Reiner versus Dorinthea about 5-ish times or so in the last like day or so that I've had the product, and overall I think it's pretty good, but I do think the balance skews towards the Dorinthea deck. And I say this because, you know, I piloted mostly the Dorinthea deck and I literally won every single time. And I'm not saying that, you know, because I'm good or anything. I think it's more that the Rhinar deck isn't quite as tuned as the Dorinthea deck. I'm also not saying the Dorinthea deck is very well tuned at all. It still has some, you know, some of those strictly worse cards in it, but I am saying that I think the Rhinar deck's a little undertuned. And that's playing against someone who is a Rhinar brute diehard, who literally brought Levia to the Pro Tour, like who just always plays brute. So he knows what he's doing, right? And if I was able to win with like 100% consistency, I would say that the brute deck is maybe a little undertuned. I don't think it's huge, like the games were still close, but it's just something that I wanted to mention. I honestly think from a new player perspective, it could be a little more balanced. Like I said, the games were pretty close, but that's, you know, with me having a pretty good understanding of the rules of Flesh and Blood and how to pilot warrior and how to, you know, sequence attack reactions and all that stuff to kind of get the most value versus someone who is very, very seasoned with brute. I think if you are two brand new players still learning the game, I think it will still be close enough that you actually have some decent matches. All right, so now let's cap this off with the price. This product is MSRP $49.99 US, but not a lot of people are selling it for that price. I've been finding it for about 45 to 40, and at that price range, the 40-ish dollar price range, I don't feel too bad recommending it to folks, especially if you are in, like I said, that period where you've just kind of started Flesh and Blood and you want to take that next step forward, or if you're just like a really big fan of the game and you just want to have this like box set product to either play with or collect, you know, crack it out during game nights, have some beers and just a good time. You're not going to get a ton of value out of the product in terms of monetary, you know, card value, but I think the product is fun. And I also think that for those people, like I said, it will be worth it for you, especially at the $40 range. Overall, like I said, I like the product. I think there are some definite things to improve upon, but as a whole, I do like the product, and I do think it's worth it for some people. Whether it's going to be worth it for you or not depends on where you are in your Flesh and Blood career and what you kind of want to get out of the game. Knowing that Legend Story Studios wants to vastly improve upon this product, both in terms of packaging and content offerings, you know, including that lore book, I'm very excited to see where this product goes and to see what they do with it and how they improve upon it. So I'm going to be keeping a keen eye out for that. And overall, I'm just very optimistic about the future of the Classic Battles product line. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. We'll see you next time.